Right. Today we're going to go over circles. Before we start doing problems, I'm going to show you how we come up with what we call the center radius form of the circle. Alright, to figure out how we come up with what we call the center radius form, say we have some circle with a center at the point HK and a radius R, and let the point XY be some point on the edge of the circle. Now the radius is equal to the distance between those 2 points, so if we plug R into the distance formula, or the distance we get by subtracting the x values, and then subtract the y values, subtract the x's, subtract the y's, then you take the square root. After you find the difference in the x's and the y's and square them, you take the square root. On the next slide, I'm going to take a better picture. Alright, this first line here is the general distance formula. Remember how we had the points x, y as the point on the edge of the circle, and also the point HK as the center? If we plug those points in, we plug x and h in for the values of x2 and x1, and the values y and k for y2 and y1. This is what we get for the formula for the radius. Because remember, the radius is just the distance between these points. So now, if you square both sides, you get the center radius form of the circle. A circle with a center HK and a radius R can be plugged into the following equation: x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. And if it's centered at the center 0, 0, then the equation simplifies to x squared plus y squared is equal to r squared. So here's a two-part example. Find the center radius form of the equation of each circle described. For part A, it's centered at -3, 4, and the radius is 6. So it'd be x minus -3 squared plus y minus the y part of the center squared is equal to the radius squared, so it'd be 6 squared. So x minus -3, that simplifies to x plus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared is equal to 36. For part B, since it's centered at 0, 0, it simplifies to x squared plus y squared equals the radius squared, so 3 squared, or it'd be x squared plus y squared is equal to 9. Here's an example. Show that x squared plus 6x plus y squared plus 10y plus 25 equals 0 has a circle as its graph. Find the center and radius. Okay, when you're just given all the terms being grouped together and you want to find the center and radius, it's probably best to put it into center radius form. Do that. Let's first get the constant on the other side by subtracting 25 from both sides of the equation. And then from there, let's just group the x terms together. X squared minus 6x plus y squared plus 10y equals -25. Now what you're going to do is you're actually going to do completing the square twice. Now for the x terms, you take the number in front of x, which is -6, divide it by 2, which is -3, then square the -3, which is 9, so you add 9 to both sides. Now you take the number in front of just y, which is 10, divided by 2, which is 5. Square the 5, which is 25. Add 25 to both sides. So negative 25 plus 19 would be negative 6. Wait, I believe that's supposed to be plus 9, not 19. Negative 25 plus 9 is negative 16 plus 25 would... That means the right-hand side is equal to positive 9. And the x terms, x squared minus 6x plus 9. That would be a perfect square, and that simplifies to x minus 3 squared plus y squared plus 10y plus 25. That simplifies to y plus 5 squared equals 9. So that means the center is at the point 3. Since it's x minus 3, the center would be at positive 3, and since it's y plus 5, the y coordinate would be negative 5. So it's centered at positive 3, negative 5, and since the equation is equal to 9, the radius is equal to the square root of 9, which is 3. Now here's another example. Show that 2x squared plus 2y squared minus 6x plus 10y equals 1 has a center as its graph. Find the center and radius. Okay, in order to do that, we need to get it into center radius form. But in order to get into center radius form, we have to do completing the square twice. And in order to do completing the square, we need the numbers in front of x squared and y squared to be 1. Since the numbers in front of both those are 2, we need to divide everything by 2. So if we divide everything by 2, that means we have x squared plus y squared minus 3x plus 5y equals 1/2. So now, if we group the x terms together, we have x squared minus 3x. Group the y terms together, we have y squared plus 5y. And that's equal to 1/2.
How?
Now let's do completing the square on the x terms. Number in front of x is just negative 3. Divide it by 2, you get negative 3/2. So square negative 3/2, you get positive 9/4. So add 9/4 to both sides. Now take the number in front of y, which is 5. Divide 5 by 2 and you get 5/2. Square the 5/2, you get 25/4. So add 25/4 to both sides. Alright. And then the left-hand side, which the x terms would be x squared minus 3x plus 9/4. Since the number we got after we divided by 2 was just negative 3/2, that means that would simplify to x minus 3/2 squared after you do completing the square, and then the y squared plus 5y plus 25/4. Since the number we got after we divided by 2 on that one was positive 5/2, that means that quadratic would factor down to y plus 5/2 squared. Now 1/2, now on the right hand side we have 1/2 plus 9/4 plus 25/4. Remember 1/2 is just 2/4. Add 9/4 to it, and then 25/4. 2 plus 9 is 11, plus 25 is 36. 36/4 is 9. That means the center is at positive 3/2 and then negative 5/2. Because you change the signs on the x and the y to get the coordinates for the center. And then the radius is the square root of 9, which is 3. Alright, here's an example of a circle that's graphed, and I want to know the center and the radius. Alright, the center, if you notice, the x values range from 1 to 5. So the center would be halfway in between the leftmost and rightmost point. So it'd be at positive 3 for the x values. And for the y's, they range from -1 to positive 3. Halfway in between -1 and positive 3, if you average them, would just be positive 1. Because you notice those are still 4 apart, so -1 plus 2 is positive 1. Now, since the x values are 4 apart, like from 1 to 5, likewise the y values are 4 apart, that means the diameter is 4. And if the diameter is 4, then that means the radius is 2. So if we wanted to write this in center radius form, that would be x minus the x part squared, the x part of the center, which would be positive 3, so x minus 3 squared plus y minus the y coordinate of the center, which would be positive 1 squared, equals the radius squared. The radius was 2, so 2 squared is 4. So this would be the equation in center radius form.